In a quiet Ohio suburb, a child disappeared without a trace from her best friend's home. The parents claimed she left in the night, but in 2025, a renovation crew uncovered something sealed behind a wall, a hidden crawl space, a child's backpack, and a camera. What police discovered from the undeveloped film would reopen a case the town buried and unearth a secret darker than anyone imagined. Subscribe for more real case-inspired psychological thrillers. September 12th, 1981. Willow Lane, Ohio. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the air heavy and warm. Inside the darkened ranch-style house on Willow Lane, 7 little girls lay in sleeping bags arranged like flower petals around the coffee table. The VHS tape had long since ended. Somewhere in the back room, a clock ticked past midnight. 9-year-old Lorianne West lay awake, staring at the flickering shadows on the popcorn ceiling. She felt strange. Watched. She sat up, glanced toward the kitchen, and thought she saw someone pass by. Footsteps, bare, software. Then a hand, a small squeak, a basement door opening where no basement should be. By morning, Lori was gone. The adults said she ran away, but the girls remembered something else. A whisper, a warning, and a door that had never been there before. March 3rd, 2025. Willow Lane, Ohio. The first time Heather Whitlow saw the crawlspace door, she thought it was nothing. A jagged line along the wood paneling, half sealed with decades of paint, barely visible behind the utility shelves in the laundry room. They were tearing everything out anyway. Walls, flooring, ductwork. The place had sat empty for nearly a year, and the bank had sold it cheap after 3 failed attempts to flip it. Something about the house made people uncomfortable. Heather chalked it up to the usual suburban rot, outdated wiring, stale air, a heaviness that clung to the foundation, like old breath trapped behind drywall. But she was practical. She'd spent the last 2 months refinishing floors and rewiring fixtures alongside her husband, Darren, with the kind of dogged optimism only first-time homeowners could summon. By the 3rd week of renovations, they'd pulled out the rotted baseboards in the laundry room and found the outline of the hidden door in full. Darren tapped it with the back of a hammer. It sounded hollow. Probably just a crawl space, he said. Older houses had weird stuff like this. Half the plumbing in this place still runs through galvanized pipe. But Heather didn't move. She was staring at the outline, her arms crossed, a frown working across her face like a storm cloud creeping in. You said the inspector found no crawl space under this end of the house. He missed a few things, Darren muttered, prying a bit of the molding loose. It took less than 5 minutes to expose the frame. The door was small, about 3 feet high and 2 feet across, sealed shut with old screws and a thin strip of dry caulk that had gone brittle with time. Want to open it? Not really, Heather said, but she was already kneeling down with a flashlight. Darren pulled back the last screw and eased the wooden hatch open with a long creak. Cold air spilled out from the void, musty and stale. It smelled of earth and something older, like wet drywall and iron. Heather clicked on the flashlight. At first, all they saw was dust. Then Heather leaned in. There was something inside. The space stretched back farther than expected, 8 feet deep, maybe more. Plastic sheeting hung from the rafters, and beyond that, the flashlight caught the edge of something colorful. Fabric. A child's backpack, half collapsed, slumped against the far wall. It was purple with pink trim, the kind sold in the early 80s, still bearing the faint image of a cartoon cat with missing eyes. Heather didn't speak. She simply stared. Darren knelt beside her, squinting. That's old, like vintage old. Don't touch it. But it was too late. He'd already stepped 1 foot inside. The crawl space groaned under his weight. Something shifted. He reached for the backpack and gently pulled it toward the opening. Dust plumed out like spores. Heather turned away, coughing. The bag was zipped. Darren unfastened it slowly, revealing the contents with quiet horror. Inside were a bundle of decayed school papers, a plastic comb, a pair of dirty socks, and a small silver camera wrapped in a faded hand towel. He held it up. It was a Minolta 110, compact, cold, and unmistakably old. The film door was still closed. Heather stood, her voice thin. "We need to call someone." "Like who?" "Police." But Heather was already reaching for her phone, her face pale. Darren placed the backpack gently on the tile and stepped back from the crawlspace, glancing into the dark cavity. His breath caught. Something else was in there. Not another bag, not a box. It was the impression of something that had once been curled up, deep in the dust, barely visible now. A hollow in the earth. Small, child-sized, shaped like a body. By the time the police arrived, the sun had begun to set. 2 patrol officers and 1 detective from the cold case unit out of Columbus stood in their laundry room while Heather explained everything twice. The detective, a woman named Val Mercer, didn't speak much. She just stared at the crawlspace while forensics marked it off and began their work. "Anyone ever tell you about this house?" she finally asked. "Only that it was a foreclosure," Heather said. "Bank-owned." "Why?" Val hesitated. "Back in 1981, a child went missing on this street. Right from this house." Heather's face drained of color. "Wait, what?" "A sleepover. 7 girls. 1 never woke up. Her name was Lori Ann West, 9 years old. Her things were still here the next morning, her shoes, her jacket. She just disappeared. No body. Never, not a single trace. Parents weren't charged. No forced entry. House changed hands 3 times since." Darren swallowed hard. "And nobody found this?" Val didn't answer. She was watching the forensics team now, who had just extracted the film cartridge from the camera. One of them held it up carefully in the evidence sleeve. "Still sealed," the tech said. 40+ years old. Could be degraded. Or it could be everything," Val murmured. The scene was sealed. Heather and Darren were told they couldn't stay there for the night. Crime scene tape stretched across the laundry door. Officers packed evidence bags into their SUV while the crawlspace stood open behind them like a mouth, gaping, cold, and breathless. Heather and Darren sat in the driveway in silence. "What if she was in there the whole time?" Heather whispered. Darren didn't respond. He was staring at the house. Inside, the crawlspace waited, empty again, but not forgotten. That night, Detective Val Mercer sat in her office under flickering fluorescent lights, the sealed evidence bag in front of her. The film was already being couriered to the FBI's imaging lab. She pulled up the old report, Case 81-092, Lori Ann West, Willow Lane. As she scrolled through the faded scan of the police file, something caught her attention. A statement from one of the sleepover girls. She was scared of the dark, said the walls made noises, that there was a whisper behind the dryer. She said the house had a secret door and that something inside was waiting for her. Val closed the file and stared at the evidence bag. Tomorrow, she would visit the mother, see if she still lived in town. And when the film was developed, maybe, just maybe, they'd finally know what Lori Ann West saw that night before the crawlspace took her, and why no one came looking there until now. The FBI's imaging lab in Quantico, Virginia, was built to handle the fragile and the forgotten, damaged reels, scorched negatives, even footage found underwater. But this one was different. A 110 cartridge sealed since 1981. 44 years in a crawlspace with no light, no temperature control, and no hope of being found. Yet somehow, the film had survived. Detective Val Mercer arrived just after the courier's confirmation, her ID cleared at the gate, her escort already waiting. She said little during the walk through the sterile halls. Only when they entered the climate-controlled evidence lab did she let her hands rest on her hips, her eyes locking on the photo technician preparing the film chamber. "Any idea what's on it?" she asked. The technician, a man in his 60s with decades of analog experience, didn't look up. "Not yet. The negatives look intact, though. Bit cloudy. Probably mold damage, but there's exposure." Val stepped closer. The cartridge was already disassembled under the hood. The smell of old cellulose hung in the air. She glanced at the report. Camera was found in a backpack with a child's belongings. Crawlspace under a private home. 9-year-old girl went missing from there in 1981. This was hers. The technician nodded. "Then let's find out what she saw." It took 2 hours to process. 5 frames, that's all. Val sat in the corner of the lab as they slowly appeared on screen, scanned, adjusted, and enhanced. Each image loaded in silence. The first showed a living room, dark, grainy, but unmistakably dated. Shag carpeting, a beanbag chair, a console TV with wood veneer. The timestamp read 9:13 p.m., 7 sleeping bags in a circle, small heads poking out, children asleep or pretending to be. One girl sat up in the frame, her mouth open mid-laugh. That was Lori. It had to be. Second image, 9:17 p.m., the same room, but darker. The TV was off now. The camera was lower, as if in a child's lap. Blurred motion across the top left corner. A shadow. Val leaned closer. The third frame was shot from the floor, near the laundry room door. Blurry again, tilted. A man's boot, old, heavy, black, stepping just into frame. Her heart sank. The fourth photo was pure darkness, but in the center, faint, just enough contrast to make it out. A face, smudged, low to the ground, childlike, eyes wide, and behind it, the edge of a hand, pressed over the child's mouth. The timestamp had jumped. 12:46 a.m. Val sat back in the chair, blood cold. The fifth frame began to render. She didn't breathe. This one was the clearest of them all. A shot of the crawlspace itself, from inside. The camera angled toward the opening. The world outside. A shoe sat in the beam of light from a flashlight. Just one child's shoe, purple, laced, small. It was a photograph of someone being buried alive. "Jesus," the technician muttered. Val didn't speak. She was already dialing. Back in Ohio, Heather Whitlow answered on the third ring. "We just got the photos developed," Val said. "Don't look at them unless you're ready. I'll bring a physical copy by in the morning." "Is it bad?" Heather asked. Val looked again at the shoe, the mouth, the hand. "It's not good." That evening, she sat in her car in front of a weathered ranch house on the far edge of town. Pale green siding, aluminum awning, cracked steps. She hadn't been here in years. Lori Ann West's mother still lived at the same address. Val wasn't in uniform. She didn't bring evidence bags or formal statements, just the manila envelope. The door opened before she knocked. A woman in her 70s stood there, thin gray hair pulled into a clip. Hollow cheeks. She looked smaller than Val remembered. "Mrs. West? I know who you are." Her voice was brittle, sharp, not unkind, just tired. Val stepped back. "I have something. It might be hard to see." "Everything's hard to see," the woman said, pushing the door open. The living room was neat, quiet, furniture older than Val. A few photographs on the wall, but none of Lori. "I want you to know," Val said carefully. "We believe her disappearance was not an accident, and we've recovered something from the house, something that confirms she didn't leave on her own." The woman said nothing, just held out a hand for the envelope. Val hesitated, then placed it in her palm. She watched the woman unfold the prints slowly, one by one, until she reached the final photo, the crawlspace. She didn't cry, didn't gasp. Instead, she sat on the couch and stared. "She said it to me, you know," the woman said after a long silence. The week before she disappeared. She said there was something in the wall, that the house had a secret mouth. I thought she was playing. Val sat across from her quietly. I told the police, back then. They said kids say strange things, that she probably wandered out at night. But she didn't. I know she didn't. She was scared of the dark. She wouldn't even go to the bathroom alone. The old woman looked at the final photo again. That's her shoe. She wore those when she was nervous, always wanted her favorite ones. I told her they were falling apart. But she didn't care. Val nodded. We're reopening the case. I need to speak with the other girls who were at that sleepover. All 7 of them, if I can find them. They'll remember, Mrs. West whispered. They all saw something. They just buried it. When Val returned to her car, she made a list. 7 names, 1 house, September 1981, and 1 photograph that proved a child never made it out alive. The Crawlspace didn't just hide a body. It held a witness, and maybe, if they were lucky, the rest of those girls had seen more than they dared admit, and were finally ready to speak. Detective Val Mercer sat at her desk in the Columbus Cold Case Division, the wall beside her cluttered with decades-old files and yellowing maps of suburban Ohio. She had written 7 names on the whiteboard in thick red marker, girls who had all attended Lorianne West's birthday sleepover in 1981. The girls were women now, scattered across the state. Some had changed names, others had no social media presence. One was deceased, cancer, 2017. She had 6. Her plan was to start with the one who had stayed closest to home. Stephanie Geller lived just 40 minutes away in a modest development outside Newark. Now 53, she worked as an elementary school counselor. Married, 2 adult children. She agreed to the meeting, but her voice on the phone was clipped. Nervous. They sat in Stephanie's tidy kitchen, the ticking of a wall clock louder than necessary. Stephanie poured coffee but didn't drink it. Her fingers kept curling and uncurling around the cup handle. I never thought I'd have to talk about this again, she said. I mean, I always figured someone might ask one day, but not like this. Not now. Val studied her carefully. Do you remember what happened that night? Stephanie gave a short, brittle laugh. I've spent most of my life trying not to, but yeah, I remember. She pushed her untouched coffee away. We were watching The Dark Crystal. Someone brought it on VHS. Lori didn't like it. Said the puppets were creepy. She wanted to watch Sleeping Beauty instead. There was a bit of a fight. Nothing big. Eventually we switched it. Lori curled up in the corner. I remember thinking she looked sad. Val waited. Stephanie's gaze dropped to the tabletop. And then, in the middle of the night, she screamed. Val straightened. That wasn't in any report. Because none of us told anyone. We were scared. And her parents, they just assumed she left, and we were so afraid of being blamed. What happened, Stephanie? The woman's face tightened. I was half asleep when I heard her. It wasn't a long scream. Just this startled sound, like someone grabbed her. I sat up. So did Heather Jarvis. We both saw the laundry room light on. The door was open. Did you see anyone? Number just movement. I thought maybe she'd gotten up to go to the bathroom or something. But then it was quiet. Too quiet. She hesitated. I went to the laundry room, but when I got there, the light was off. I opened the door anyway. It was pitch black, and I heard something. Breathing. Wet. Like something trying not to be heard. Val's hand paused on her notepad. What did you do? I slammed the door shut and ran back to the living room. I didn't say anything. I just lay back down. Heather asked if everything was okay. I said yeah. I lied. Val nodded slowly. Why didn't you tell the police? Because I was 9, and I was scared, and no one wanted to believe a little girl who said the house had something alive in the walls. Val didn't push harder. She just reached into her bag and pulled out the printed photo, the 5th frame from the camera. She slid it across the table. Stephanie stared. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. "That's the door," she whispered. "We never knew it was there, but that's where she went. That's what I heard." Val left the house with more than she came for, a confirmation, a location, and now the first crack in the silence. One by one, she tracked the others down. Heather Jarvis lived in Cincinnati. 2 kids, divorced. When Val showed her the film photos, she vomited in her kitchen sink and asked for a moment alone. When she came back, she said she'd always remembered a shape in the laundry room. Something tall. She thought it was Lori's father at the time. Now, she wasn't sure. Robin Ames refused to talk. She sent a lawyer's letter. She had no comment, no recollection, and no interest in revisiting traumatic childhood memories. Megan Holloway broke down in tears before Val even sat down. She admitted to seeing a man at the sleepover. "I thought he was a parent, but he wasn't." She wouldn't describe him, just said he had gloves on. Julie Reese said nothing, not during the interview, not after. But when Val got home that night, a voicemail was waiting. "I lied. We all lied. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. She wasn't supposed to disappear, but someone let him in, one of the adults." Click. The next morning, Val returned to Willow Lane. Heather Whitlow was in the backyard, working on the garden to distract herself from what she now called the hallway that breathes. "I don't even go near the laundry room," she said. "The smell's gone, but it's still there, like it remembers." Val didn't go inside yet. She walked around to the side of the house and crouched near the foundation. The crawlspace entrance had been sealed by forensics, but something else drew her attention. A narrow vent, maybe 6 inches tall, just above the ground. It had rusted nearly shut, but traces of disturbed dirt trailed out from under it, like something had been dragged through. That evening she reviewed the old case files again. Lori Ann West's father, David West, had been questioned but never charged. He had an alibi. He'd gone to work that night at the paper mill, left before dinner, and came home after the police were already there. The mother insisted he'd kissed Lori goodnight before he left. But one thing stood out in Val's notes. David West's brother had stayed with them that weekend. A drifter, unemployed, known to have mental health issues. Gerald West. No follow-up interview, no last known address. Val pulled up state records. Gerald West had died in 1992. Apparent suicide, found in a motel room outside Akron. No family claimed the body. He'd been cremated and buried in a shared grave. But there had been one item in his motel room listed on the inventory report. A small plastic comb, decorated with cartoon cats. The same kind in the backpack. Val sat in silence as that detail sank in. He had taken a souvenir, which meant he'd taken Lori, which meant, unless someone helped him, he got her out of the house, across town, and into hiding. The crawlspace wasn't his final destination. It was only the start, and someone inside that house had known he was there. The second time Heather Whitlow heard the sound, she told herself it was the pipes. It was after midnight, and the house was quiet. Darren was asleep. The TV was off. She had been walking past the laundry room on her way to bed when the hum started. Low, rhythmic, almost like breathing through the wall. It pulsed faintly beneath the dry wall, under the washer and dryer, like a heartbeat behind insulation. She froze. The forensic team had cleared the space. The crawl space had been fully processed, the evidence catalogued and removed. There was nothing left. And yet... Heather stepped into the laundry room, slowly, carefully. The floor was cool beneath her bare feet, the tiles still half covered in the dust of recent construction. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something older, something metallic, like rusted nails or blood. She turned on the overhead light. It flickered twice, then steadied. The room was still. No sound, just the hum in her ears and the static of old drywall. She stood over the dryer, her hand on the machine, palm flat. It was vibrating, but the plug was out of the wall. She bent down, pulled the unit slightly forward, and shined her phone's flashlight along the baseboard. And there it was again, the faint outline of an old panel. Another one. This one was smaller than the crawlspace door, barely 2 feet wide, set flush into the wall behind where the dryer had always sat. Heather leaned in, heart pounding. She touched the seam. It was sticky with old paint and dust. She stood, then walked away. She didn't sleep. By morning, the temperature in the house had dropped 2 degrees despite the thermostat holding at 70. Heather called Detective Mercer at 7:42 a.m. "You need to come back," she said. "I'm on my way," Val replied. By 8:15, the laundry room was full again. Val, Darren, a forensics assistant from Columbus, and 2 officers from the local department. Heather stood in the hallway in an oversized hoodie, arms crossed tightly. Val examined the wall carefully. "I think this one was sealed later," she murmured. "Looks like someone knew the crawl space was too obvious. But this?" She gestured to the panel. "This was personal." The forensics assistant ran a handheld scanner along the baseboard. "There's something metal behind it," he said, "and wiring. Possibly a camera." Heather flinched. "A camera?" Val turned to her. Back in the 80s, even criminals were experimenting with closed-circuit video. If Gerald West was acting alone, he may have used this space to observe the kids. Or he wasn't alone. She stepped aside. "Go ahead. Open it." The assistant used a small pry tool to separate the wood. It came loose with a sigh, like the wall itself had been holding its breath for 4 decades. Behind it was a dark cavity, about the size of a suitcase. A small metal box sat bolted to the studs. The assistant pulled it out slowly. It was a reel-to-reel recorder, early 80s, military surplus, wired crudely to an external power pack that had long since corroded. But the reel was still in place. "Can you play it?" Val asked. "I'd need to clean it first. Might take a few hours. Then get it to Quantico. No mistakes. Gloves. Bag it." He nodded and sealed the evidence. Val stepped back. She looked at Heather, who hadn't moved. "Are you okay?" Heather shook her head. "I don't think the house wants us here anymore." That afternoon, Val sat in her office, reviewing everything they had. The crawl space, the film, the girls' testimonies, Gerald West's motel suicide, the plastic comb, and now, this recording. She stared at the whiteboard. Red strings connected names, photos, dates. In the center, a single phrase she had written in capital letters. "Someone let him in." Because Gerald West couldn't have gotten into the house unnoticed. It was a tight-knit neighborhood. Small town, Midwestern. You didn't just walk into a home full of children during a sleepover and go unseen, which meant someone had invited him, someone who knew the family. She pulled up the report again. Lori Ann West's mother, Helen, had insisted Gerald left before the sleepover started. She claimed he had taken a duffel bag and caught a bus back to Akron. But no bus ticket was ever found. No witness at the station remembered him. And in the father's original statement, there was one curious line. "I thought I heard something downstairs when I left for work. A door shutting. I figured it was Gerald leaving. But what if Gerald had never left? What if he'd simply gone into hiding? What if Lori's father, David West, had walked right past the man who would take his daughter? The FBI had found Gerald's fingerprints on the crawlspace hatch. But there was another partial print they hadn't matched yet, on the inside of the dryer panel. Val requested a new comparison. She sent a message to the lab. "Cross-check that partial print against David West's employment file. I want everything." She leaned back, fingers steepled, staring at the wall. If Gerald had died in 1992, there was no reason for a panel to still be humming, unless someone else had been down there, maintaining it, watching. That night, Quantico called. The tape was cleaned, restored. They would send a digital transfer by morning, but the tech had already heard enough to give her a summary. "First few minutes are quiet," he said. "Then it's a child's voice, asking for her mom." Val's stomach turned. "She keeps saying she can hear someone on the other side of the wall, breathing. She's crying." Then it cuts to music. "A music box, I think. Twinkle, twinkle, little star." His voice dropped. "And then you hear a man. Just one line. Barely a whisper." Val closed her eyes. "What does he say?" The tech hesitated. "He says, 'If you lie again, you'll go where she went.'" Val opened her eyes slowly, already writing the words down. Not just abuse, not just kidnapping. There had been more than one. More than Lori. The Crawlspace wasn't just a hiding place. It was a vault. And someone had been filling it for years. The audio file came in at 6:17 a.m. Detective Val Mercer had been awake since 4, her mind a hive of unresolved questions. She opened the laptop at her kitchen table, coffee untouched, eyes bloodshot. The file was labeled simply, "Recovered Tape 1981, RR-01.WAV." She plugged in her headphones and hit play. At first, static. Then the mechanical click of a reel-to-reel beginning to spin. The audio was muffled, distant, a child's breathing, a sniffle. Then a girl's voice, high, trembling, unmistakably young. "Mom? Mom." The sound of something scraping, nails maybe, against wood. "I don't like it in here." Silence. "Is someone there?" Then the mechanical whine of a music box. Tinny, warped, playing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The same phrase repeated, slower each time, like a machine winding down. Then a whisper. "If you lie again, you'll go where she went." Val ripped off the headphones. The voice wasn't just male, it was familiar. She played the clip again, isolating that phrase. The words were spoken low, close to the microphone. Confident, controlled. Not a stranger's voice, not an addict or vagrant. This was someone used to obedience, someone with power. Her phone buzzed. It was the forensic lab. "We matched the partial print from behind the dryer panel." She gripped the receiver. "It's not Gerald West's, it's David West's, Laurie's father." Val's stomach turned. 44 years. 44 years of interviews, false leads, community grief, all with the killer sitting quietly at his daughter's memorial services, helping investigators, posing as a devastated father. He had never once been considered a suspect beyond the initial questioning. Clean record, stable job, married. No history of violence. But he had lied. And now she had the proof. She called the Columbus field office and requested 2 officers and a warrant. Then she drove back to Willow Lane. It was a gray, snowless morning. The house looked smaller than before, tucked beneath leafless oaks. The crawlspace door had been resealed with temporary boards. Yellow tape still lined the property. Heather and Darren had moved into a hotel. Val parked across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, an unmarked SUV pulled into the driveway of the house next door. The West residence. Helen West still lived there. So did her husband. David stepped out to collect the mail. Gray-haired, thin, slightly hunched. Dressed in a pressed flannel tucked neatly into khakis. A man who mowed his lawn weekly and waved to the mailman. Val stepped out of the car, badge in hand. "David West?" He looked up, startled. "Yes?" She nodded to the SUV. "We have a warrant to search your home and property." His smile faltered. "Is this about the crawlspace?" "It is. I told everything to the police. I cooperated. We believe you withheld information. And we've discovered something, your fingerprints behind a sealed wall, a recording device, a child's voice." His eyes darkened. Val stepped closer. "We have a recording of your daughter's final hours." For a moment, nothing moved in his face. Then, a slow blink. "Would you like to come inside?" he said calmly. The officers moved with her, cautious, hands near their belts. Inside, the West home smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Family photos lined the hallway, but not many of Lori. Just one, a school portrait near the stairs, 8 years old, smiling, gapped teeth. Helen West appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale. "David?" she said quietly. "It's fine," he replied. "They're just doing their job." Val followed him downstairs. The basement was finished. Old paneling, mismatched furniture, a dusty treadmill. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. "I did what I had to do," David said softly, leading them toward the far wall. "She lied. That night, she let him in. I heard her whispering to someone through the dryer vent. She opened the door. I told her never to open the door." Val stared at him, her breath caught. "You're saying Lori let Gerald in? He came through the side gate. She unlatched it. I told her, if she did it again." He trailed off. The silence was thicker than the walls. "She was just a child," Val said. David nodded slowly. "And that's why I gave her a chance. I told her to stay quiet, to stay down there until I came back, but she screamed." He placed his hand on the wall. "I didn't mean to kill her. I needed her to learn, not to lie." Val stepped back, disgust surging in her throat. "You buried your daughter alive." He turned to her, eyes dry. "She betrayed the family." The 2 officers stepped in, cuffing him without struggle. As they led him up the stairs, Helen West collapsed into a chair. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know he was still here that night. He told me Gerald had taken her. He cried so hard." Val stared at her. "You let him bury your daughter under your house, and you lived here. All these years." "I didn't know," she repeated, but her voice cracked. Val left without another word. That night, back in the station, she filed the formal charges. David West. First-degree murder, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, unlawful confinement of a minor. But something still didn't feel right. The voice on the tape, the whisper. It was David's, but it wasn't only him. Val opened the evidence file again and stared at the transcript from the recording. Right before the tape ends, there's another sound. A second voice, quieter, female, older. A whisper beneath the whisper. The words, "She knows too much." Val played the final 2 seconds again and again. Because David may have killed his daughter, but someone else helped him hide her. And she had been living right upstairs. Detective Val Mercer sat alone in the evidence room, headphones on, every light off except for the glow of the waveform on her laptop screen. The reel-to-reel audio from 1981 had been filtered through 6 layers of software, slowed, inverted, cleaned. She wasn't interested in the child's voice anymore, not this time, or David West's whispering threat. She wanted the last line, the one said beneath it, a voice soft as breath. She adjusted the playback, played the final 5 seconds on loop. "If you lie again, you'll go where she went." Then, under it, barely audible, buried in the static. "She knows too much." Not a hallucination, not a coincidence, not an audio artifact. Another person was there, in the crawlspace, or near it, possibly behind the wall, next to the recorder. And it was a woman. Val leaned forward, staring at the screen like it would reveal a face. If David had buried Lori, who was she? And more importantly, was she still alive? She began with the obvious. Helen West. Lori's mother, a woman who'd played the grieving parent for over 4 decades. But there had always been something off about her interviews, even back in 1981. Too composed, too precise. Never cried in front of officers, never pushed the investigation, always redirected attention back to Gerald West, her brother-in-law, the convenient scapegoat. Val reopened the interview transcripts. She found a detail that made her freeze. In one report, Helen told police she'd fallen asleep on the couch during the sleepover and woke up to screaming. In another, she said she and David had gone to bed early and slept through the night. 2 different stories, and no one had questioned it. She pulled up the official timeline. Lori went missing between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The other girls remembered the TV being turned off after the movie. Someone had walked through the living room. At least 2 girls claimed to see a shadow moving toward the laundry room around midnight. Helen's shadow? Val pushed away from the desk and stood. She needed to see her again. In person. Now, by 9:15 a.m., Val stood outside the West residence once more. The yellow tape was still up. The front porch sagged slightly. She rang the bell twice. Helen answered, wearing the same pale pink cardigan she'd worn during David's arrest. Her hair was pulled back, freshly combed. She looked hollow, but dry-eyed. "You again?" she said flatly. "I need to ask you some follow-up questions." Mrs. West. Helen opened the door, slowly. "I suppose you want me to confess now, too." Val stepped inside, her voice even. "Should you?" The living room felt like a dollhouse left in the attic too long. Sunlight slanted in through closed blinds. The air smelled like potpourri over old fabric. "I didn't kill her," Helen said, sitting carefully on the couch. "I didn't know what David did until years later, not until after the funeral service." Val sat across from her. "What changed?" "He got drunk one night. It was the anniversary. 5 years. He told me he hadn't meant to kill her, that she screamed and he panicked." "And what did you do?" Helen's eyes flicked up. "I made him stop talking. I made him promise to never say it again." "You covered for him." "I protected what was left of our family, my son, my reputation, everything that was already in ruins." Val leaned forward, her voice quiet. "You were there that night, weren't you? Not asleep, not in bed. You were in the hallway, near the crawlspace. I never went into that crawlspace. But you spoke. We have a voice on tape, a woman's voice. Right after David threatens Lori, it says, 'She knows too much.'" Helen blinked, very slowly. Val continued, "It's faint, but it's you. You were there. You watched him do it, or you helped." A long silence stretched between them. Helen's hand rested on her knee, twitching. "She was going to tell," she whispered at last. "About the photos, about the camera. She'd seen something she shouldn't have." Val's pulse kicked. "What photos?" Helen's voice trembled now, not with fear, but with long-delayed collapse. "David had a dark room in the basement. You didn't find it, did you?" Val stood, suddenly cold. "Show me." Helen moved slowly, like something breaking open inside her. She led Val downstairs, past the old treadmill and folding chairs, to a closet door. Inside was a narrow stairwell, one the original house plans didn't show. It descended into a hidden root cellar. The air smelled of mold and old chemicals. A rusted Sears enlarger sat on a workbench. Empty trays, yellowed paper, a red light bulb dangling from the ceiling. In the corner sat a dusty cabinet. Val opened it. Hundreds of photographs, negatives, all children, some asleep, some staring directly at the camera, all taken from odd angles, low, behind doors, through vents. One was of Lori. She was brushing her teeth, half-dressed. The label on the back read, "September 10th at 10:14 p.m. Val snapped on gloves and began bagging the evidence. Helen sat in the stairwell, unmoving. "I told him to stop," she said, voice distant. "After the first year, he said it wasn't about hurting them. He said he just liked watching." "And you let him stay," Val said. "You stayed married. You protected him." Helen didn't reply. Back at the station, Val processed the darkroom evidence. Every photo, every timestamp. They would scan them, cross-reference school records, contact every family possible. The scope of the crimes was widening. Lori was only one of the victims, possibly not the first. Val pulled up Gerald West's file again. He'd been unstable, disliked by David, used as a scapegoat. But in 1981, he had no criminal record. The motel inventory listed just 3 items: a comb, a children's shoe, and a photo. A photo of Lori, signed by David. "You did good, brother." "She's quiet now." Val dropped the file. They were both involved. David had buried her, but Gerald had helped prepare her. And Helen? She had sealed the wall. 1 family, 3 accomplices. And no one had noticed. Not the neighbors, not the school, not the police. Until the house opened its mouth again and told. That testimony was taken 3 weeks after Lori disappeared. Val wrote down a note. She didn't vanish. She was trapped. And the house kept her. That night she visited the Crawlspace again, alone. The new seal had already been installed. The boards were clean, fresh drywall, fresh paint. She sat on the floor in front of it and whispered, "I believe you." The air shifted. A faint thud sounded behind the wall, like someone shifting weight. A voice followed, low, soft, almost breath. "I'm not the only one." Val turned, heart pounding. Because that voice. It wasn't Lori's. Detective Val Mercer spent the next 3 days combing through every archive the state allowed her to access. Property tax filings, contractor permits, blueprints, land surveys, electrical rewiring forms. She wasn't just looking for Lori anymore. She was looking for the others. Whoever said, "She's not the only one," whether a living survivor or something imprinted into the walls, was right. This house had secrets built into it, and someone had paid to keep them hidden. She finally found it in a microfiche file labeled Property Alterations, 1979, submitted by a licensed contractor under David West's name. Scope of work: substructural ventilation retrofit, additional in-wall utility channels, dry access corridors between bedrooms. No reason, no architectural necessity, no permit follow-up, no inspection signature, just a paid stamp. He'd added hidden spaces 2 years before Lori disappeared. Why? Val drove straight back to Willow Lane, arriving at dusk. Heather and Darren were long gone. The house stood empty, the windows reflecting the gray sky like dead eyes. She entered with keys and a flashlight. Down the hallway, into the laundry room, then the guest bedroom closet, where the secret chute had been uncovered. The narrow passage descended into darkness. Val knelt and crawled in. The air was thick, stale, smelled like old metal and sweat. She dragged the flashlight beam across the walls. Plaster dust floated like ash. The tunnel twisted. At one point it narrowed so tightly she had to shift sideways. Then it opened again, revealing a secret chamber no one had found yet. 6 feet wide. No light, no vents, just drawings. Dozens of childlike sketches scratched into the drywall in crayon and pencil. Stick figures, girls with wide eyes, a square room, a girl in a corner, another girl in the wall, a man with no face, and words, over and over. She watches. Don't cry where he can hear. Crawl to stay safe. She still sings. Val crouched, her breath loud in her ears. At the center of the room was a blanket, faded Care Bears print, and a pile of old toys. A Rubik's Cube, a broken doll head, a plastic cup, and a tiny bracelet with alphabet beads, Mary. She radioed the station immediately. Search the missing children records for a Mary, ages 6 to 10, gone missing between 1979 and 1983, within a 100-mile radius. Cross-reference with last known address near Willow Lane. The dispatcher called back within the hour. Mary Ann Gutierrez. Disappeared in July 1980 while walking home from her babysitter's house in Mansfield, Ohio. No suspect, no body. Family long since moved out of state. No known connection to the Wests, until now. Val stared at the bracelet. Her blood ran cold. David West had started using the Crawlspaces long before Lori. And Mary hadn't vanished. She'd been kept. For how long, and where did she go? The room held no remains, no bones, no blood, just a child's life, frozen in time. Val backed out of the chamber and marked it with tape for forensics. Outside, the wind had picked up. Rain slicked the pavement. But she wasn't finished. She made one more stop that night. The cemetery. She wanted to see the marker. Lori Ann West's headstone, placed years after her disappearance. It sat on a hill, quiet and plain. Lori Ann West, born 1972, vanished 1981, found 2025. She sleeps beneath the stars she once counted. Fresh flowers had been placed at its base. But there was something else. A toy music box. Old, metal, rusted. Val reached down and opened the lid. It began to play, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. The same song Lori had been forced to listen to in the crawlspace. Except now, it wasn't warped. It was clean, perfect, deliberate. The tune ended, and inside the music box lid was a folded slip of paper. She opened it slowly, scrawled in childish handwriting, "She's not done." Below it, another line. "She remembers who helped." Val stood up fast, scanning the cemetery. No one, just the wind. But whoever left that note had been here recently, and they knew. Knew about Lori, knew about Mary, and knew someone else was still involved. Someone who hadn't yet been caught. Back in her car, Val reviewed her interview logs. Helen West was under protective custody. David was awaiting trial. Gerald West was dead. But what if someone else had known? Someone who had visited the house regularly. Someone Lori could have trusted. She flipped open her old case folder. One name stood out. Ruth Delaney. She'd been Lori's Sunday school teacher, lived 3 doors down. She'd testified in 1981 that Lori was a gentle, obedient girl, and that the family was devout, respectable. She was never interviewed again. Val ran her address. Still lived in town, still in the same house. She was 79 now, and she had once, according to an old neighborhood watch log, owned a key to the West residence. Val's pulse pounded. Because Ruth Delaney was also Mary Gutierrez's babysitter, Detective Val Mercer drove through the early morning storm, windshield wipers slicing the rain in hypnotic rhythm. Ruth Delaney's house stood at the edge of the cul-de-sac, the kind of modest, gray brick ranch common to mid-century Ohio suburbs. Same curtains, same porch swing, same yard angel leaning sideways in the front flower bed. The house hadn't changed in 40 years, which made it perfect for hiding the kinds of secrets that never aged. Val parked across the street and waited. The lights were already on. A faint glow in the kitchen window. She saw the silhouette of a woman inside, old, small-framed, moving with slow deliberation. Ruth knew she was coming. Val stepped into the rain and approached the door, coat soaked through in seconds. She knocked twice. No answer. Just the creak of the porch swing behind her. She turned. No one there. She knocked again, louder. The door opened slowly. Ruth Delaney stood in the narrow frame, wrapped in a housecoat. Her hair was white, pinned back tightly. Her hands trembled, not from fear, Val sensed, but from age. Or guilt. "I figured you'd come," Ruth said. Her voice was soft, lined with phlegm and prayer. Val held up her badge. "Detective Mercer, I have some questions." Ruth nodded once. "Come in, dear, before the cold gets you." Inside, the house was heavy with the scent of boiled potatoes and dust. The wallpaper was yellowed. Religious paintings lined the hallway. Lambs, angels, doves in mid-flight. A crucifix hung crooked over the coat rack. Val followed her into the kitchen. "I don't keep up like I used to," Ruth said, gesturing to the cluttered table. "A worn Bible," An old rotary phone, a tin of butterscotch candy. Do you know why I'm here? Ruth nodded. You found the crawlspace. Val studied her face. Calm. No fear. You knew about it? I did. Val took a slow breath. Did you know about Mary Gutierrez? Ruth's mouth twitched at the name. She was a quiet child, bright, liked stories, always asked to sleep under the table. I never asked why. She disappeared while under your care. I know. You didn't report anything unusual, because no one would have believed what I saw. Val stared. Try me. Ruth turned, looked out the rain-flecked window. Her voice lowered. She came back. The night after Mary vanished, Lori, she came to the window, but she wasn't outside. She was in the glass, like her reflection stayed when she didn't, just staring. Big eyes. She mouthed something. I didn't know what it meant at the time. Val waited. She said, she took me, not him. Val's jaw clenched. Who was she? Ruth looked at her then, truly looked. Like peeling back a curtain she hadn't dared touch in years. Helen. Val felt the world tilt. Helen West? She hated the girl. Said she was too soft, too emotional, always sneaking food to the stray cats, crying at TV shows. David wanted a boy. Helen. She wanted someone who could be molded. Val's voice was low. Are you saying Helen was involved in her daughter's death? I'm saying Helen didn't see her as a daughter. She saw her as something to control. David built the crawlspace, but Helen told him where to dig. Val shook her head slowly. She claimed she didn't know. She knew. And when David got sloppy, when he started keeping them too long, she brought in Gerald to blame. Val backed away, breath short. And Mary? Ruth looked down at her own shaking hands. She came to me in the summer, with bruises. Said Helen pinched her. Said she heard crying in the vents when she stayed over. I told her to be brave, to pray, but I didn't protect her. The next week, she vanished. You didn't tell the police? I told the pastor. He said not to spread rumors about a good family. Told me to be still and trust. Val nearly screamed. She reached into her coat and pulled out the photograph. The one found in the crawlspace. The crayon-scrawled figure in the corner labeled M. She placed it on the table. She drew this in the hidden room, in your neighborhood, with your key. Ruth's eyes welled. I should have burned that key years ago. Val pointed at her. You had access. You visited often. You knew children were going missing around you and said nothing. I was afraid, Ruth whispered. I thought if I stayed quiet, the house would forget me. Val slammed the table. The house doesn't forget. It remembers. In its walls, in its pipes, every breath, every cry. Mary scratched prayers into the drywall, and you sat across the street and did nothing. The old woman wept. But Val had no pity left. You're going to give me everything. Every visit, every moment you saw Helen act strange. Everyone she brought to that house. Ruth nodded slowly. She used to take photos, boxes of them. Said she was building a trust file. Kids who wouldn't be missed. I helped her sort them once. Val's voice dropped. Where are they now? She mailed them to someone, a man in Alabama. I never asked who, but the letters came back. Every Christmas. Always postmarked Montgomery Val stood. Her hands shook with fury. The case wasn't over. It was spreading. She had uncovered a single house, a single family, in a network of rot that ran deeper than she thought possible. As she turned to leave, Ruth spoke again. She came back last night, you know. Lori, or something that looked like her, stood in the hallway mirror, smiled. Val didn't turn around. Then she said something, Ruth whispered. Val paused at the door. She said, You have one more to find. Then she vanished. Val stepped into the rain, Ruth's words clawing at her spine. She had found Mary. She had buried Lori, but there was still one more girl in those walls, still lost, still waiting. And Val was going to find her. Detective Val Mercer stared at the Montgomery postmark on the envelope Ruth Delaney had provided. One of the Christmas letters Helen had received nearly every year since 1984. The handwriting was pristine, feminine, elegant loops that looked nothing like Helen's jagged scrawl. Inside was a folded card, a stock image of two cardinals perched on a pine branch, and 3 words written in blue ink. Keep the door. Nothing else. No return address. But Ruth had been right. The letters had always come from Montgomery, Alabama, and the one thing Helen West had never explained, not in court, not to the press, was where she disappeared to for 3 weeks in late 1983. The official story: grieving, visiting family. But her mother had died years earlier, and no relatives were ever located. Val called in a federal trace request through the Bureau's Montgomery liaison. The woman on the other end of the line, Agent Myra Walker, sounded surprised when Val read off the West name. "We had a property seizure back in '93, Myra said. "Just outside Montgomery. Abandoned church, converted to private residence, belonged to a shell corp. Guess who signed the paperwork?" "Don't say it." "Helen West. Alias name used, Eleanor Shaw." A chill ran up Val's arms. "Anything left behind?" "Property's been locked down since 2007. Local kids kept breaking in. We found some disturbing stuff. Doll heads nailed to the walls, beds too small for adults, padlocks on the outside of bedroom doors." "Any evidence of children?" "We found handprints on the inside of one of the closet doors, but no records of missing persons linked to the address." Val felt her heart slam against her ribs. "There's someone else," she said softly. "Another girl. Still missing, possibly never reported." She booked the next flight out. When she landed in Montgomery, Myra met her with a black binder, crime scene photos from the 2007 raid. Val flipped through them in silence. Each image hit like a hammer. A room with no windows, a plastic mattress, a bowl with dried milk, and a drawing. Crude, scratched into the wood of the floor. 3 stick figures. One small, one tall, one kneeling. Underneath them, in red crayon, "I see her in the pipes." Val looked at Myra. "Where's the girl?" "We don't know there was a girl," Myra said gently. "There were signs of recent habitation when the place was sealed, but no body, no clothes, no DNA except some old fibers. We think they cleared it before we arrived." "But someone lived here." "Maybe. Or maybe she was never here physically." Val didn't answer, because she had seen those drawings before. The handwriting, the figures, the phrases, back in Ohio, on the Crawlspace walls. Lori didn't draw them. Mary didn't either. So who did? She turned the next page and froze. A photo, grainy, flashlit, taken in a broken hallway of the Alabama house. There, etched faintly into the wall: "My name is Anna." Val dropped the binder. Anna, not in the case files, not in the archives. No police report under the name Anna West or Anna Gutierrez or any girl named Anna reported missing in connection with Helen or David West. She picked up her phone, heart racing. "Ruth," she said when the old woman answered. "You said Lori came to you in the glass. Told you someone else took her." Ruth's breath was faint on the line. "Yes." "Did she say a name?" Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she said Anna watched, that Anna told her not to scream. Val's blood ran cold. Anna had been there, but she hadn't been a victim. She had been a witness, raised in the walls, shaped in silence, and now possibly still alive. Val flew home the next morning, straight to Willow Lane. She didn't stop at her office, didn't wait for a warrant. She walked into the empty house, flashlight in hand, and made her way to the crawlspace one last time. The boards creaked under her boots. The smell was back. Not rot, not mold, dust, dry dust, undisturbed for years until now. She reached the final chamber, the one where Mary had drawn on the walls, and stood still. There was a new drawing. Fresh. A girl curled in the corner, and a second girl standing in the wall, and written between them, scratched with a nail into the plaster. She helped them, but she helped me too. Val turned slowly. Anna, she said aloud, if you're here, I'm not going to hurt you. I need to talk to you. You're safe. Silence. Then, behind the vent, a whisper, so faint it barely reached her ears. She's watching. Val stepped closer. I need to know. Did you escape? Are you still hiding? The vent rattled. Something small moved behind it. A face, pale, thin, wide eyes, like a photo undeveloped too long. Then it vanished. A voice followed, little, dry, afraid, but clear. Don't let them take me again. Val fell to her knees. Anna, she said softly, tears stinging her eyes. No one's taking you. Not ever again. Silence. Then, the sound of a latch. A soft click, and the wall slowly opened. The panel swung inward, revealing a narrow hollow. No drywall. Just exposed beams, cobwebs, and the stale breath of years. And at the end of it, barely visible in the beam of Val Mercer's flashlight, crouched a girl. No, not a girl. A woman. Small, pale, skin tight over bones, dressed in layered children's clothes, 2 sizes too small. Her hair was tangled into thick mats. Her knees were tucked up to her chest. Her eyes never blinked. Anna. Not a ghost, not a memory. Real. Alive. She flinched as the light caught her, fingers twitching as if they were still bound. Val dropped the flashlight immediately, letting the beam point at the floor. She knelt down, hands open. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Val. I'm with the police. Anna didn't speak, but she didn't run. That was something. Val tried again. You've been here this whole time, since 1983? The silence was heavy. Then Anna's voice, so faint it sounded like wind through ductwork. Since the day Mary stopped answering. Val's breath caught. Mary. She had lived long enough for Anna to know her. They'd been in the walls together. Were you the one who drew the figures? Val asked gently. The messages on the walls? Anna nodded. They told me not to speak, but the walls remembered. Tears hit Val's eyes before she could stop them. How did they keep you hidden for so long? Anna's head tilted. They trained me. Helen said I was the good one. Quiet, invisible. I learned to crawl without sound, to breathe through pipes, to wait. Val's stomach turned. She said the world wouldn't want me, that I was better in here. She lied, Val whispered. Anna blinked slowly. I know. Val reached out her hand. I'm taking you out now, okay? You don't have to live in the dark anymore. Anna hesitated. She looked behind her, into the small, rag-lined tunnel she'd called home for 4 decades. She's still here, she whispered. Val froze. You mean Laurie? Anna shook her head. Number her. The house creaked above them. She walks the floor at night, opens the doors that should stay shut. I think she's angry. Val's voice tightened. Helen's dead, Anna. But Anna didn't answer. She just whispered, not all of her. Behind them, something knocked in the pipes. Not water, not wind. 3 times, sharp, slow, intentional. Val moved quickly, reaching for Anna, guiding her forward, helping her crawl through the narrow wall and into the guest room. The woman trembled like an animal being led into the sun for the first time. Paramedics met them outside. Anna blinked in the daylight, shielding her face. When they tried to lift her onto the stretcher, she panicked, clinging to Val's jacket, whispering, no more doors, no more rooms. Val climbed into the ambulance beside her. At the hospital, Anna was diagnosed with severe malnourishment, early-onset osteoporosis, and multiple untreated fractures that had healed wrong over the years. She didn't speak again for hours, but when she finally did, it was in her sleep. Whispers, names, details. and two chilling words repeated over and over. Other house. Val sat beside her bed all night, recording everything. By morning she had a list. Partial names, numbers, nicknames, years, scribbled on a nurse's notepad. A map of where it happened again, and again, and again. Anna hadn't just survived. She remembered. She remembered what Helen did, what David built, what Ruth allowed, and what Anna had been made to witness, in silence. Before Val left, Anna reached out and grabbed her hand. Her voice was clear now. "I wasn't the last." Val's spine turned cold. "There are others?" Anna nodded. "She took them somewhere else. The house here was too loud." She said, "Alabama was just the beginning." Val stood, a fresh case file already forming in her mind. There would be no rest, no easy resolution. But one thing was certain. The house had given up its secret. But the family wasn't done, and the network ran deeper than anyone ever feared. She left the hospital that morning with a new name on her lips, one not in any report, one Anna had whispered just before she fell asleep again. The farm. A place she had never seen, but remembered from the sound of screaming. Val walked out into the cold morning light and began again. 3 months later. Detective Val Mercer stood at the edge of a windswept cornfield in Sumter County, Alabama, staring at the broken remains of a long-abandoned farmhouse. Weathered wood, a collapsed silo, the smell of rot in the air, even before the excavation began. This was the place Anna had whispered about, the place Helen West referred to in one of her coded journals as the Second Silence. No address, just coordinates scribbled on the inside of a Bible found under Helen's floorboards. The journal entry read, "When the Ohio house got loud, I brought the rest to the farm. Easier here, quieter, no neighbors, no records." The girl doesn't talk, not anymore. That entry was dated May 1984. Anna had only ever seen the farm in drawings Helen brought her. Sketches of red barns, a silo, a fenced field full of children with no mouths. Val hadn't wanted to believe it, until Anna remembered a name. Rosie. She was the only one who had tried to escape. She climbed the wall, Anna had said. She screamed until her voice didn't work. Then she was gone. I think they buried her near the tree. Val had asked what tree. Anna drew it, perfectly, from memory. A gnarled, leafless oak with a split trunk and a rusted tire swing. The tree was here, in the field, standing like a grave marker. Val turned to the forensic team. "Start digging there." It took 5 hours. At 2:23 p.m., the tech called out, voice tight with horror. "Got something! Fabric! Bone! Small!" They dug carefully. Piece by piece, they uncovered the remains of a child. Long bones curled into a fetal position, cloth pressed into the mouth. A faded sweatshirt still barely visible across the ribcage. On the front, Myrtlewood Elementary Field Day, 1984. Rosie had been real, unreported, unsearched, forgotten, until now. By nightfall, the farmhouse was declared a crime scene. Cadaver dogs hid on 2 more locations. Small bodies, each wrapped in burlap sacks, labeled with dates written in Sharpie. R. May 12, 1984. C. August 3, 1984. N. October 27, 1985. All children, all girls, none in any database. Val stared at the evidence bags. Helen hadn't just enabled David. She had expanded his reach. She had selected, curated silence. Back at the station, Val pulled out the last photograph from Anna's tunnel, one she hadn't shown anyone yet, because it hadn't made sense until today. 3 girls, standing under a tree. 1 tall, 1 small, 1 crying. In the corner of the photo, a woman's shadow, holding a spade. Val turned the photo over, A message was scratched into the back. She always buried them where they couldn't bloom. Anna hadn't drawn this. She had kept it. A survivor's archive. A warning. Val stood in her office long after midnight, watching the rain streak down the window. This wasn't over. The Wests were gone, but their network hadn't been fully uncovered. The Ohio house had been one chapter, the farm another. But somewhere, more children had vanished. Unrecorded. Unremembered. Until someone started listening to the walls. Val picked up her recorder, clicked it on, and began to speak. Case file 2045. Recovery of remains tied to the Willow Lane disappearance. 3 additional victims confirmed. 1 known survivor, Anna, in protective custody. Investigation into related locations ongoing. The dead are speaking now, through crawlspaces, pipes, and photographs. Through drawings and the voices of those who watched but never forgot. We failed them once. We won't again. A faint creak echoed in the hallway outside her office. She didn't move, because in her mind she saw the crawlspace again. Not empty, not silent, just waiting. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, a whisper. She's still watching. Willow Lane, Ohio. 1 year later. The house was quiet now. The floors had been redone, the drywall repainted. New family, new furniture, new laughter echoing down the halls. A realtor's photo in the window called it cozy, sun-filled, beautifully restored. No one mentioned what had been beneath. In the nursery, a toddler played with blocks, unaware of the sealed crawl space beneath her feet. The parents had never been told. Legally, they didn't have to be. The past had been sanitized, scrubbed clean. History buried under floorboards and silence. But the house remembered. At 3:13 a.m., a sound stirred. A soft rattle. From behind the vent in the hallway. The baby monitor crackled. Not static, breathing, and a voice. Faint, childlike, still echoing through the pipes. I told you I wasn't the last. The blocks shifted. The vent creaked. And somewhere beneath the nursery floor, dust rose again, like breath, like memory, like something waiting to come back.